Welcome back to the AB Sports College Football Podcast. We are here in the studio after a bracket has now been revealed. After all this time, the postseason has arrived. And I'm joined in the studio alongside Leo Roses and Nolan Ezett. Alex Ketchum, producer Alex on Zoom as always. And we have a very special guest in the studio today. USC professor and Heisman voter Jeff Fellenzer is here with us today. Jeff, how are you doing? Say hi to the audience.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a blast to be able to do this with you guys, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your journey, working in college football, working at USC, and how you got to become a Heisman voter.
Yeah, it happened 2007 when I got a call from a friend of mine who had been contacted about joining the Heisman voting fraternity. Family, and he was a little removed from college football. He had written about the sport for years for Sports Illustrated, and in fact, a professor of mine here at USC, Joe Jars, really was a significant influence on me and my career. And he said, I just don't feel connected enough to the sport right now, but I'm thinking you might be interested. And I said, absolutely. So I got in touch with the regional coordinator. They have a coordinator for each of the 6 regions, and he handled the West Coast region. And so we had a vetting process of about a week, and said, I'm good. We just need to get it approved by New York. And they did that. And then I got a call, and I was actually in Heritage Hall at a football rally. I had taken a friend of mine to one of those Friday pep rallies. The team was there. And I thought, oh, this guy will get a kick out of seeing he'd been to USC and had been back in years. And while I was there, I saw the phone and it was flashing. I said, this might be the Heisman folks. And I went outside and it was. And they said, welcome to the family. And I thought, well, it's kind of an appropriate place to get that
the USC Heisman trophies when you find out you're a Heisman voter.
Yeah, it was just where I happened to be at that moment, late on a Friday afternoon. But no, I've been around college sports. It's a real passion of mine for a long time. I wrote a column on recruiting when I was at the LA Times. It's something I created, and that kept me very dialed into high school and college. So I was looking at college sports through the eyes of coaches as they were scouting, recruiting high school players. And so that also helped fuel the interest that I've always had in high school sports, and getting a chance to watch kind of the next generation of great players. So I have a group of guys. It's kind of our Friday Night Lights group. We go to a different high school game almost every Friday night during the season. And along the way, I get a chance to see players that I know I'll be seeing in college, and in some cases, voting for them for the Heisman Trophy, like Bryce Young, which was a kind of surreal experience since I met him here at Annenberg when he was being recruited by USC. And he came here and was interested in media, so I arranged for he and his dad to meet with me, and then to watch the steps that he took to in high school. At that point, he was between his sophomore and junior year of high school, transferring from Cathedral to Mater Dei, and committed to USC. And about a month after we had our meeting, and then ultimately flipped to Alabama, and then went on to win the Heisman Trophy. So I've been connected to college football in that way for a long time, going back into the 90s. And even before then, I was following it so closely. I felt like when I got the opportunity to join the Heisman voting family, that I was definitely connected and invested in the sport in college football. I'd be following it closely even if I didn't have that connection to the Heisman Trophy. But since then, it's changed the way you watch college football, because you have to feel like you're seeing the players and the teams that you need to see to be fair and objective, and have a good grasp of the country. You don't want to ever feel like you're going to be surprised too often. Somebody's saying, "Hey, have you seen so and so?" And you hope that you've done a good job of your prep work, so you know sort of where to look and who to expect. And I do that in a lot of the off season, spend time preparing for the next season. But it's really an honor, and it makes it a lot of fun. And I cast my ballot officially yesterday afternoon. I'm not allowed to reveal who I voted for until the announcement is made, but I was excited to finally press send and wrap up another year with it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's such an honor to have an expert such as yourself on the pod with us. We hope one day to reach the level of college football acumen that you have acquired over the years. But for now, we're still about 500 on our game picks, not even against the spread. So hopefully we'll get there one day. But
I have no doubt you will.
Jeff has been a professor of Nolan and I during our time here at USC, and we've learned a lot from him, both inside and outside the classroom. So we're excited to bring him onto the pod and get his opinion on this bracket that we got yesterday. These rankings. I guess before we get into it, I have to obligatorily show the standings of the game picks where I've lost my lead, and TJ, not joining us on the pod today, has hopped into first place. I think I had about a 6-game lead 3 weeks ago, and it's slowly gone down. I took Alabama in the upset, which was not good. I took Ohio State, like most people did. Leo, you took Indiana.
I'm the only person here who took Indiana, and I felt great about that.
That's what kept you in second.
Yeah, I know.
Nice call, Leo. I would have been with you.
Yeah.
I've been on Indiana for a while now. Really,
All right.
Really high on them.
Should have listened to you in class before making some of my picks. But let's see what the committee did end up doing when they released that bracket yesterday. So the 10 teams that made it in ranked in the top 10: Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Miami, with the, some could say, shocking switch up over Notre Dame, despite neither of them playing a game. Notre Dame, BYU, Texas, Vanderbilt, Utah, and I'm ashamed that bracket cut off just before USC down at 16. We were in the first 6 out, you could say. Pretty good season for the Trojans here. Tulane and James Madison also made it in, 2 G5 schools, which that's a whole issue in and of itself. But I wanted to get into the Alabama, Miami, Notre Dame decision with you all. Ketchum, let's start with you. What do you think about how the committee handled all of that?
I've been listening to a bunch of the pundits today, and it's so funny. The last 24 to 36 hours has all revolved around. I think everyone agrees that the Miami Notre Dame debate was the correct step was taken. And I don't know if there's anybody that's arguing that Notre Dame should have been in over Miami. I think the problem that everybody has is with the process, and that comes from the weekly ranking shows. And I think I was a little surprised to see Alabama not drop at all. I think the result that they came up to of the teams that are included is fine and correct. I just think the process was a little flawed this time around with how brutally transparent it was. I think it almost could have benefited from a little bit less transparency throughout the last month and a half.
Yeah, I agree. Just having Miami be number 18 and Notre Dame be number 9 in the first rankings, and then neither of them losing a game or winning a game, winning a big high-profile game, but somehow coming close enough in the time to where they flopped at the end was interesting. And then
Biggest game was against the same team.
Yeah.
They both played Pitt, both beat them in a similar fashion.
And it fixed itself eventually. And I firmly believe that if it had been like the March Madness committee where they just reveal it at the end, that this is the same result that we would have gotten. But the controversy comes from the fact that Notre Dame was ranked ahead of Miami each of the past 5 weeks, and then they had to kind of undo themselves there.
Ketchum, let me ask you this. Do you think there should be less transparency or no transparency? Do you think they should really take a March Madness type committee level where they come out with the rankings at the very end and that's that?
I think a good way to put it might be throughout, or just the same way that March Madness does it. They do their 3 weeks out rankings where they just do 16 teams and they don't do a whole 25 or a whole 64 team field. I think honestly that might be a good way to do it, just to see kind of where they were at. I do think that would have raised some questions, even though just with the 8 slot difference. But I think, I don't know, it's kind of a double-edged sword where less transparency also equals less trust. And from the public opinion, I don't know. I think I don't think the results is what people are upset with. I think it's the process.
I agree with that. Jeff,
I would
what do you
agree.
think?
Yeah, I would agree with Ketchum on that. I'm big on head to head because my point is there's so few times where there is a head to head, occurrence that you'd have to say when there is, then use it. So I didn't have an issue with Miami being chosen ahead of Notre Dame because of the head to head. But yes, I do. I think the process certainly has flaws. I can see the problem with the transparency being that then you notice then you evaluate the process. You see the inconsistencies and the problems. So would you rather have that? Would you rather know how the sausage is made, or would you rather just have it unveiled? I think probably there's some kind of a compromise where, like you guys are saying about the March Madness, that maybe you reveal, if it continues to be 12 teams, maybe reveal the top six or four, something to give people an idea of what you're thinking, but you don't go too, because the controversy comes really to fill out the bracket.
Exactly.
So there are steps you can take, I think, going forward that maybe make that a little bit easier to deal with when the choices are made, rather than people looking at the inconsistency and saying, "Well, what's been the case here?" Now, that being said, the eye test tells me that Notre Dame is certainly a team deserving to be included in a 12-team playoff. I mean, they look as physically impressive, dominant. Just using the way that the USC games, if you want to just look at the Oregon game, the Notre Dame game, and you see physically it was clear. It was clear cut that Notre Dame was a harder matchup, I think, anyway, than Oregon, and that was even a few weeks back. And I think Notre Dame is better. So it's kind of hard to accept not seeing them. It's just the system that we have, and it's certainly flawed. I like it better than having just four. I certainly would be open-minded about what's the number we could arrive at that would be, most accepted by enough of the college football community. Is it 12? Is it 16? Is it 6? I've talked to people for the last couple of weeks that have had made cases for each of those. But what we have is at least an expanded field beyond 4. And I'm excited about some of the matchups that are here and that lie down the road.
Yeah,
with this group.
Me too. I agree with what you said about kind of the power Notre Dame has shown. I believe that if in this past 3 or 4 weeks, if Notre Dame had been scheduled teams like Oregon or Oklahoma or other teams in contention, that they probably would have won, or if not put up a really good fight, but they didn't. They were playing a bunch of Syracuses and just didn't have the resume after losing those couple early season games to kind of keep them out. Leo, what do you think about Alabama? Because pretty much nobody moved after the conference championship weekend. Like Ohio State and Indiana swapped. Georgia didn't go up. Texas Tech didn't go up. Bama didn't go down. BYU dropped 1 spot. Even like North Texas and Virginia only fell by 1 spot in the rankings. So basically nothing changed in the rankings as a result of the conference championship. Is that how it should be? Are these teams just rewarded for playing another game?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely how it should be. You don't want an Alabama team to not want to play in the conference championship game. They are the 1 seed in the SEC. You don't want them to feel like they're getting shafted because Texas A&M didn't win their conference, and Oklahoma didn't play as tough of a conference schedule. Alabama has maybe the best group of wins in the country. They have probably, I guess now Indiana's the best win. They have the second best win in the country at Georgia, even though it feels kind of canceled out. They had that stretch where they played a ranked Missouri team. They played a Vanderbilt team that finished strong. Alabama's a really strong team, and even though they look weak now, I think you can't punish them because the back half of their season hasn't been as strong as the front half when they still finished 10-2 with great wins.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It is hard to punish a team for losing a game that they qualified for when other teams didn't qualify.
And I think the committee made that clear last year with SMU. Then you could have known that when Ohio State was ranked 2 and Georgia came in at 3.
Yeah.
Well, especially when you're putting other teams in the same conference in who didn't qualify for that game.
Yeah.
You can't put Ole Miss in the playoff when they didn't qualify for that game, but take Alabama out for qualifying for it.
I mean, particularly.
Bama did lose to Florida State as a counterpoint to that take, but I do completely understand it still.
Like if we're talking about not a Power 2 conference, if we're talking about an ACC or a Big 12 or especially a Group of 5 team, obviously, maybe you can punish them. Although I still think you need to have consistency. If you can't get rewarded, you can't get punished. If you get punished, you can get rewarded. But if we're talking about SEC or Big 10, if you make that title game, you can't punish them for losing it. When you're going to put other teams in that conference.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now BYU got punished.
Yes.
I mean, they were 10-0 against every team not named Texas Tech, with 5 wins over teams that won 8 or more games. That's a pretty strong resume.
Yeah.
And they got bounced because they happened to play Texas Tech again, and that was pretty much front and center.
Yeah, I don't like that they got bounced when other teams didn't.
Yeah.
Alabama should be moving down if BYU is moving down.
Yeah, BYU has 4 losses in the last 2 seasons total and 0 playoff appearances.
I don't see
because
this
they're
as-
in the Big 12. Like, imagine saying that about an SEC or a Big 10 school.
Yeah, it's like clearly they're saying your conference championship game is not as telling on the Big 12 as the SEC or Big 10 conference championship game is, and I think that's the inconsistency you're talking about.
I don't think, though, they dropped BYU because they lost their conference championship game. I think they just dropped BYU to fix the Miami Notre Dame.
I think you're probably right.
So
I think that's
Stupid
fair.
committee.
I think it looks bad for BYU, but I think in all they have the same evaluation of them as they did going into the week.
That's a fair point.
So we looked at the teams that got in and the teams that didn't get in, but let's take a look at the bracket. So we got 4 first-round games. We got Alabama, Oklahoma. Winner will play Indiana in the Rose Bowl, which I'm sure Jeff will be at.
I will be indeed.
James Madison against Oregon. Winner plays Texas Tech in the Capital One Orange Bowl. Miami and Texas A&M in a great first-round matchup. Winner plays Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Look out for A&M there. That could be a very strong maroon crowd, that game being in Dallas. And Tulane versus Ole Miss, winner in the Sugar Bowl, which also maybe could be a Ole Miss crowd with that game being played in New Orleans. So our first round.
New Orleans.
What's up?
Tulane's in New Orleans.
Tulane's also in New Orleans. Well,
right.
That's really interesting. They put that game where it could be almost a home game for Tulane. I'm sorry, I didn't respect Tulane enough there, but
if they win at Ole Miss, more power to them. They can get a
home game against Georgia.
I don't think it's going to feel like a home game when you see the Georgia crowd. Would be my guess at the Sugar Bowl.
But I bet if that game was anywhere else, it would feel like a Georgia home game. Now it makes it a little more of a even playing field.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yep.
We got this graphic up here with the games, the records, the networks. ABC with 2 of the games. TNT paid a huge sum of money to get the 2 17.5 plus point favorite G5 teams playing on the road. They can't be too happy about that one. Ketchy, what sticks out to you about these point spreads in round 1?
Well, the point spread's definitely one of them, especially Tulane, however, already gotten blown out at Ole Miss earlier this year. But what sticks out to me is I'm just still sitting here wondering if Notre Dame would have beaten either Texas A&M or Miami. I mean, still the jury's out on that one.
I believe they lost both of them.
Exactly.
That's the joke.
Exactly. No, I think, TNT got shafted here, but at the end of the day, that's the system that pretty much everybody has signed off on. I think I don't think James Madison or Tulane is going to put up necessarily a fight, but man, those first 2 games are going to be fantastic. Like that's why you brought in the 12-team playoff, is for Bama, Oklahoma, and then Miami A&M.
My biggest takeaway was the fact that Alabama is a 1.5 point favorite in Oklahoma, despite Oklahoma winning in Tuscaloosa a couple weeks ago, and Alabama probably being the coldest team in the top 16 right now. I do agree they earned their spot in the playoff, but being favored.
Andrew, I did a double take when I saw that. If you'd have said, and I always like to do this, what do you think that the line will be before? I would have said probably Oklahoma by a field goal, by 3, based on obvious for first having the home game and then having already beaten them. Unless you're playing psychologists and saying how hard it is to beat a team twice, and I don't think that in Vegas they're doing that. They're crunching the numbers and they've come up with a formula that has Alabama as a slight favorite. And you can't even say it's an SEC thing since they're both in the SEC. You could have said that in the past, but that one baffled me. I still kind of feel like Alabama winning in Norman feels like it would be a slight upset.
Yeah.
If it happens.
I agree. Alabama played in Norman last year. I think the score was maybe 24-7 or something. That was that big high-profile loss at the end of the year that kind of knocked them out of the playoffs last season. So, yeah, I am surprised that Alabama is favored. Leo, you got anything to say about the rest of these games? I think we'll get some picks on the podcast next week because we do have a week in between with the Army-Navy game and a couple of early season bowl games. These games don't kick off until December 19th and 20th. But
I sold my Oklahoma stock weeks ago.
You did.
I was very wrong, but I think that line has more to do with not trusting Oklahoma at all than anything with Alabama being strong or good. They don't look very strong at all. But again, Oklahoma probably should have lost to LSU 2 weeks ago. So they just feel so they're a team that can lose so easily without scoring any points.
That's fair. They kind of feel like in the wins they've gotten in the past couple months, there's been like one really big offensive play. In that Missouri game, they had that 85-yard touchdown and like a 17-6 win. The LSU game, like a 60-yard touchdown with like a complete and total broken coverage for LSU that gave them a 17-13 win. So they have been sneaking by, but Alabama doesn't look good at all. So
it's a really good defense that Oklahoma has.
Really good.
It's a really good defense.
They can keep their offense in the game. But let's not waste any more time. We've got the Heisman voter here in the building to talk about the Heisman Trophy. So we've got this all flash up on the screen of this year's Heisman candidates, the top 5 odds, not in any particular order, according to BetMGM. You got Jeremiah Love, the Notre Dame running back, Fernando Mendoza, Indiana quarterback, Jacob Rodriguez, Texas Tech linebacker. Always good to see a defensive player on there. Ohio State QB Julian Sayin, remarkable efficiency this year, and then Diego Pavia, this day and age is Johnny Manziel, if you will. He's a big Johnny Manziel. I know is a big Diego Pavia guy, and he's up there for Vanderbilt after leading them to a great season that unfortunately came up short of a playoff bid. So, Jeff, I know you can't reveal who you voted for, but whether it's talking about this year or previous years, tell us about your process of being. You went into a little bit, but maybe some details on being a Heisman voter.
Yeah, I make it a pretty detailed season-long process, or I do, as you guys know, taking my class in the fall. I do an update every week, a top 3, and then what I call knocking on the door, the honorable mention, which is usually a group. Beginning of the season's maybe 10 more names, and then I narrow it down as the season goes along. So by the end of the year and last week's class, I think I had 3 or 4 names in the honorable mention category, but I had a top 3. And it's always interesting who gets invited to New York. We'll actually know that in a few minutes. The voting stopped at 2 p.m. West Coast time today, and then they'll announce very soon which players are invited to New York. I think it probably will be 3. I think it'll be Mendoza, Pavia, and Sayin would be my guess. And if there's a 4th, Love, you'll know.
It's not always 4 that they invite?
No.
Interesting.
It varies. They've had different numbers. They don't want to invite too many, so it feels like it's just the charades of trying to create some drama when you make the announcement, and everybody would kind of know that it's not going to be these other 3 or 4 candidates that may have been invited. So they keep it to a number that's realistic, where you feel like any of these
Could have a shot.
Could have a shot. I think probably Love would be my guess, would be maybe the 4th in line behind the 3 quarterbacks. So if he's invited, if there's 4 invited, then you'll know that it's at least relatively close of 4. If it's 3 invited, then there was a big drop off in the voting between 3 and 4. Is usually how you'd want to look at it. But it was really dramatic to watch the Ohio State Indiana game, knowing that these were probably the 2, if I had to guess, maybe leading contenders. Although I feel really strong also about Pavia. I discussed this with a friend of mine who made a really good case. This is a week or so ago we were talking about it, and he said nobody is more valuable to his team than Pavia to Vanderbilt. And I said I can't really argue that. It's compelling, and it puts him, to me, right there. But I think going into the last week, into the conference championship game, the Big Ten, undefeated, how they had managed their teams beautifully, both Mendoza and Sayan. I think that's probably how it's going to be, one or the other, maybe 1-2, 2-1. But Pavia, again, a great case, a great story. They're all great stories.
Mm-hmm.
Mendoza, son of Cuban immigrants, and no big-time scholarship offers to the last minute out of high school, on his way to Yale, ends up at Cal through a connection on the Cal staff to his high school, and then to be now in a position where he possibly could be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft is pretty incredible. And Pavia's story as well, transferring from New Mexico State. The idea of 2 guys, too, this separates a little bit for me. That you would be playing for programs that have been sort of traditional bottom feeders, Indiana, which has lost more Big Ten games than any school in the conference, in the history of the conference. Again, playing Ohio State the other night, that had won more games other than Michigan than anybody in the history of the conference.
I think I said on the broadcast, Ohio State had won 30 straight against
30
Indiana.
Straight. Wow. 30 straight. 30. So the idea that you could be lifting those programs, and Vanderbilt, which again, you always were counting on them to bring up the rear of the SEC. It reminded me a little bit of a few years back when I was deciding between Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III. I had Luck on top pretty much the whole season. I mean, I really liked maybe the first 10, 11 weeks. And then finally at the end, I flipped. I voted for RG3 because I thought, at that time especially, lifting Baylor up, even though Stanford, hasn't always been at the top, but they had a good run at that time with Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw. I thought lifting up Baylor was an even greater achievement. That was a tiebreaker that I looked for. We all have the things that we look at to help decide when you're looking for separators. For me, that was it then in voting for RG3, and I think this time the idea of lifting up those 2 programs, Indiana and Vanderbilt, made each one a compelling case.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good. It's cool to hear the RG3 example. Maybe think of all of the legends of the game that you've got a chance to vote for. RG3, Cam Newton.
Well, and the very first one in 2007, my first year, was Tim Tebow. And I thought, well, boy, this is pretty easy. It's always this easy. Then I think just about anybody could do this. He was so good and so strong, and as a candidate, there wasn't a close second. But there have been years when it was, you really could flip a coin, and then a year like 2015, where I felt that the best player in the country didn't get the award, Christian McCaffrey. I had him clearly, not just. I felt he not only should have won the award, but it should have been a landslide. Derrick Henry won it, who I had second, and who I think is a terrific player, had a great NFL career. He just wasn't as good that year as Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
And I don't think people even are aware of just how special of a season he had, both as a running back, receiver, and kick returner.
Some Heisman years are built differently than others, and I think that Alex has prepared some comparisons from this year's Heisman candidates to some previous players and their numbers. So this will bring back some memories for you and for the rest of us of these players we've been watching for the past few years. But Mendoza did have a great season, 13-0, lifting up an Indiana program that had not been on the top of college football. But Alex, I'll hand it off to you on this one. Let's see how he compared numbers-wise to the last few Heisman-winning quarterbacks: Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Bryce Young.
Yeah, I mean, the research for this was pretty clearly that Mendoza's numbers are below all three of these guys. I do think that Mendoza's biggest point of why he is in this conversation is because he has led the Indiana Hoosiers to the number one seed in the college football playoff. And that is something that nobody, like even 3 years ago, you're thinking that is impossible and never happening. And I think that is part of this. I think I was kind of astounded that he didn't even eclipse 3,000 passing yards yet in his 13 games. I think I cut out for a little bit, so I might have missed this. But Jeff, would you say that this is probably a less productive year overall from a quarterback perspective than some of these other three?
Yeah, I think the numbers aren't as flashy, but I also have a thing that I try to remind myself is don't be a slave to statistics. Otherwise, you could just at the end of the year just see who's the leader in the most statistical categories and say, well, that's where my Heisman vote's going. So, there's still the eye test. There's the feel that you have watching a team in a game, and then the Penn State game for Mendoza certainly jumped out, that Heisman moment that you always hear about, which is important to have, that, a memory that pops into your mind when you think of the candidate. But, Caleb Williams was another year that, like I mentioned, Tebow in 2007, Caleb was also, it was just like he just raced away with the award. He grabbed it and ran with it, and that was that. It's not always that clear cut, but again, I'd say a great separator for Mendoza, as you said, Alex, was who he lifted up, which team he lifted up, and a 2-year transformation that is just astounding, absolutely astounding. When you see, I mean, to be in the playoffs twice in 2 years with this program, they didn't even need the 1 year to get close to the playoff. They made it even in Kurt Zignetti's first year. I saw them when they played at the Rose Bowl last year.
Against UCLA.
I think it was the opening game. And I remember thinking, wow, they're pretty good, because I noticed all the transfers and all the James Madison players that he brought with him. And Curtis Rourke came in from Ohio U. And like, that guy could play on Sundays, a quarterback. Like, this team's pretty good. They look legit. And then a year later, they're undefeated and on top of the college football world.
Yeah, they've. I think they had one season with 6 or more wins from 2008 to 2023, and then 11-1, 12-0, 13-0 now in the past 2 seasons. Pretty incredible. So even though the stats aren't quite there, it's hard to argue that he hasn't been one of the most impactful players in the country this year. And while we're at it, I just want to say I don't know quite as much as the Heisman voters, but I would have given my vote to Michael Penix over Jaden Daniels a couple years ago because of...
Which I did.
Which you did. I knew I liked you. I just thought 13-0 compared to 9-3, and you said, like, don't be a slave to stats. And Penix and Odunze were kind of willing Washington to wins almost every week.
You've just grabbed it right off my script. I said practically the same words. I looked at Odunze and said, NFL guy without question, big time. I met Penix at the Elite 11. He was a counselor that summer before his senior year at Washington. So I just kind of kidded him. I said, "Give me a good case to make for you this year, and well, I'll be watching you." And really impressed with him too, character and just off the charts. So that was again, separator for me was leading an undefeated team. And helping them get to that point. Didn't ultimately finish it off, but I felt he had a really strong case. And by the way, a transfer from Indiana.
Yeah, full circle there.
Yeah.
And before we get going, I've actually been, until watching Mendoza make every throw he needed to in that Ohio State game last Saturday night. I was team Jeremiah Love for Heisman.
I still am.
Because you still are?
Yeah. I'll get to that in a second.
Get to that in a second. Yeah. I just thought that he was the best player on the field in every game. And I could just tell, just looking at him. He just looked like the best player on the field. Mendoza won me over with some of those big throws against Ohio State, which is one of the best defenses I've ever seen. Jeremiah Love, again, Notre Dame needed to play a game. Maybe they should join a conference. Maybe he'd have had 250 yards against Virginia if they were in the ACC championship game and won the Heisman. But here's his stats against some of the notable running backs. Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey, which Jeff brought up earlier, and then Ashton Genty with 2,500 yards and 29 touchdowns last year, which is just absurd. Maybe snubbed. That's a conversation for a different time. I know Travis Hunter had as a very, very unique Heisman season last year. Maybe we can get into that some other time. But Nolan, Leo, you got anything to say about Jeremiah Love, Fernando Mendoza? We got a few minutes left.
Well, Jeremiah Love's my Heisman. And the reason for that is the language that I've always heard behind the Heisman is it's the best college football player. It's not the most value. It's not necessarily the most impactful. It's different than, the NFL MVP, right? It's the best player. To me, Jeremiah Love is absolutely better than Mendoza, Sayant, whoever you want to say. I think Mendoza, all credit due, but Cignetti's an awesome coach. He really transformed that team even last year, and they're the number one running team in the Big Ten. They have the most rushing yards per game. They have like a trio of running backs that really help open some of the passing lanes, whereas I think Love is the best player on his team. And so, Professor, I wanted to ask you this. We have years where there's clearly like a quarterback is insanely valuable. Take Caleb Williams, take even, Penix, even though he didn't win it, obviously. They get the Heisman, right? Because they're the quarterback, they're the most valuable, and they're awesome. But then we have years where, Travis Hunter wins it, even though he wasn't the most valuable player. It was probably a quarterback, right? At least I would say. To you, is it the best player? Is it the most impactful, or is it a split between the two?
It's Nolan. It's such an interesting question, and with the 930 voters, there are lots of different ways to look at it that I'm sure that they do. I can just tell you, look, the best player in the country might in fact be a linebacker or an offensive lineman, but you have to have measurables. You have to have numbers, statistics for voters to work with. Otherwise, it's just really hard, and that's why they have these separate categories. So an offensive lineman has his own category, a defensive back, a wide receiver, so you can judge them among their peers. It's hard to pull it away from a quarterback. I felt last year was justified because you had a unicorn, somebody that was elite, both sides of the ball, playing snaps when, it was crazy. Basically treating a college game like a high school game or a middle school game. Yeah, just play your best players. I think to myself sometimes, if you grab the candidates for the Heisman, let's say half a dozen, 6 or 7 candidates, and you got together and put them in a park, like down the street from one of their high schools, and say, just choose sides and play the game. Who would be the best player? And that's to your point about Love. You'd say the best player in that setting probably is Love. And a year ago, I said, if you grabbed a bunch of guys and put them in a park and said, just go play, I said, I don't think anybody would be better than Travis Hunter.
First pick in the recess football draft.
He'd be catching passes on offense or play quarterback, and he'd be the guy that defending the receivers on the other side of the ball, and he was doing it in college at a high level. It was like, I kind of wanted to celebrate something that just doesn't happen very often. So that was the thinking. And, somebody else looks at it a little bit different, maybe looks at statistics and says, boy, how can you top kind of what those numbers are like? That's why you have a lot of voters to be able to have some kind of balance, some kind of offset in the thinking. But that's, everybody kind of uses different metrics. And my friend that mentioned for Pavia saying that nobody's more valuable. Again, is that the same as best? Close, but maybe not.
Definitely a difference, yeah.
It's a difference. But I think the idea of lifting your team and program is something to consider. Absolutely. So that's it's not easy. I had Genty number 2 last year, and in many other years, I would have been very justified to have voted for him. Would have been happy to vote for him. I loved him, loved his pick where he went in the draft. But I think this year it's going to be hard for Love to get over those 3 quarterbacks. Though I thought he was great all season and dominant, kind of as you suggested.
All right, we got
pitch in on Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love and Notre Dame lost their 2 biggest games of the year, and in both of those games, the biggest takeaway was not how awesome Jeremiah Love was on the Notre Dame offense. It was that people thought C.J. Carr looked really good. Meanwhile, you look at Mendoza, and they went to Eugene, they won. That Penn State game was all about him leading that last drive, making that throw. And then in the Ohio State game, where they only put up 13 points, it felt like every time Indiana needed a throw made, he made it, and he made it perfectly. So I just think it's hard to take a running back without remarkable stats and without not on a dominant team over a QB who has multiple Heisman moments.
And to Leo's point, I think that the drive to take it down the field and score and really lock up the game, take the lead, come back again and continue the drive after getting knocked out of the game. The first play, add all that together. So impressed, kind of with the pressure you're feeling in a game of that magnitude. How he handled it was amazing. And then one more thing on Love is to not finish with a strong game against Stanford, knowing that you weren't going to play in a conference championship game. I think he needed to send a good message to voters by having a big last game against Stanford and didn't really have it. So he didn't finish as strong as I think he needed to make his final case.
Yeah, I mean, he was playing from behind for sure. If you're not a quarterback, you're playing from behind. You kind of got to. He's still my Heisman, but the second he didn't have a big.
It's just hard. It's hard when quarterbacks that can statistically both passes and runs. Pavia, the idea of rushing for almost 1,000 yards. Think about that. That's why I had Haynes King very high all season long. So it's just hard for other positions to compete with having those kind of numbers. It's you can do it. Hunter did it last year.
Yeah,
but it doesn't happen too often.
It was also a weak quarterback class.
Yes,
that
agreed.
Definitely changed it.
All right. Well, we only got about another minute or two, but just wanted to stake my pitch for Mekhi Lemon for the Biletnikoff real quick. I know Jeremiah Smith is probably the better NFL prospect, better receiver in terms of how you want to forecast, potential Hall of Famer one day. But I think this year, Mekhi Lemon was the best receiver. I think Ohio State may still have gone 12-1 if they didn't have Jeremiah Smith. I think there were a few games where Mekhi Lemon was absolutely the biggest factor that USC won that game. I just wanted to throw that in there as a Trojan, as we all are. I know we're rooting for Mekhi to win that award and had a fantastic season. And I do think he's deserving of it. I think you guys can echo that.
You heard me say this in class, Andrew. I thought he was the best receiver that my eyes saw this year. With all due respect to Smith, and it's 1A, 1B, whatever. But I just didn't see a player that was more tenacious and better hands, route. I mean, everything. I thought Mekhi Lemon was just off the charts good. So that would be my vote.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Jeff, for joining us today on the podcast. We had a great time.
Thank you.
Leo, Nolan, Alex, been a great semester. This is our last one in the studio for the semester as school ends this week. So
your last one as a student.
Last one as a student, USC student, graduating at the end of this week. But
strong.
Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. All the viewers out there, you can't get rid of me. AV Sports lasted through high school, lasted all the way through college, and I'm not planning on going anywhere. So for Alex Ketchum, Nolan Ezett, Leo Roses, and special guest Jeff Fellenzer, I'm Andrew Brooks, AV Sports, and signing off. God bless the USA.